So what is a dangerous dog? In this video, you'll learn exactly what a dangerous dog is, and there's quite a few shockers. There is a common belief that dangerous dogs are owned by dangerous people or those who intend to cause harm to others, but this isn't strictly true. So firstly, let's define dangerous. The definition of dangerous is likely to cause harm or risk. It doesn't mean they have, it means likely to cause harm or risk. And when this applies to the dog law, the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991 states that it is a criminal offence if your dog makes someone reasonably fear injury. If this can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, the dog will be considered to have been dangerously out of control under Section 3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991. Now this applies to all dogs of all breeds, ages and sizes. So let's clear up the most common myth. My dog would never bite. Any dog can bite and any dog can be dangerous, regardless of their breed, their size or age or neutering status. Saying my dog would never bite is, quite frankly, very irresponsible, and it shows a real lack of understanding of dog behaviour and what drives dog behaviour and emotions. Dogs have emotions just like we do. It's very dismissive to just assume that they would never ever bite anything regardless of the situation that they're put in. Any dog can bite because it depends on what they believe is happening at the time. Bites can happen to anyone regardless of their intent. Even the most well-meaning of person can get bitten by a dog, and quite often they do. However, the media have a nasty habit of only highlighting the dog bites that are caused by breeds that suit the story that they're telling. This is usually bull breeds, and certainly at the moment XL bullies, and it's commonly Rottweilers or German Shepherds too. As a dog behaviourist, I see my fair share of dangerous dogs, and that's because these are the ones who I often choose to work with. I like the really complex cases and those with a higher risk. But putting bites aside for a moment, because a dangerous dog isn't necessarily a dog who will bite. Let me walk you through some recent scenarios. I was out with a client recently during a session, and we've been working on reactivity towards other dogs and people who the dog doesn't know. During this session, we were walking through their street, and suddenly a golden retriever ran across the road to us and attempted to greet our dog, and this would not have gone down well. The dog had seen us and pulled the lead out of his owner's hands to run across the road. I quickly approached the dog and took him back to his owner, who was completely unfazed. It turns out this dog does this quite often, and my client actually knows of this dog because he did it to them only 2 weeks before, and he'd actually run out in front of a car and nearly got hit. So who is the dangerous dog in this scenario? Is it our dog who has reactive behaviour and doesn't like people or dogs when there are people and dogs around? Or is it the happy, friendly, goofy golden retriever who pulls the lead out of the owner's hand and charges across roads towards people who don't want to interact with him? I have a client who I'm working with at the moment, as their border collie recently broke the arm of the toddler who he lives with. This incident happened in their home due to the dog anticipating that the toy was going to be thrown. A family member had been throwing the toy up and down the living room for the dog, and he was going inside and outside and getting ready to chase the toy. And as the toddler walked into the room behind the dog, at the same time the dog thought the toy had been thrown. So he dived backwards to get the toy, which pushed the toddler into the TV unit. And sadly, the toddler broke his arm, and he's now terrified of the dog. Is this dog a dangerous dog? I recently finished a behaviour support programme with a client who has a Mastiff Cross, who had been encouraged to fight other dogs by his previous owner. He was incredibly head shy, and due to his reactivity towards other dogs and some people too, his new owners couldn't walk him. We worked through muzzle desensitising with him, and he's always walked on a Longline. He's now starting to get really wiggly when he sees people coming towards him, and he's getting fantastic at checking in with his owner whenever he sees a dog, regardless of what they're doing, whether they're running around chasing something, or if they're looking at him, or if they're walking in the street. He's getting really happy about doing these now. Is this a dangerous dog? I was contacted by a friend of the family, as they've got a cockapoo who often resource guards food. Now, I've never worked with this person, but I do know them. And they'd left their cockapoo with their friend over Christmas. The cockapoo was a well-known resource guarder of food and would often snarl and guard anything that he had, although this information wasn't shared with the friend. So unfortunately, during the time he was left with the friend, he started to guard his food. and she approached him to tell him off for growling at her. "Don't do this. This is stupid. Do not do this." So he launched at her and he bit her hand, her arm and her chest multiple times, and she ended up in hospital. In another example, the 2 dogs who moved in with us 6 months ago were strong resource guarders in their previous home. They would guard space, people, toys, shoes, food, everything and anything from each other and from the humans in the house, which resulted in lots of fights and lots of bites. Since moving in here 6 months ago, we haven't had one resource guarding incident at all. They were also incredibly dog aggressive, one in particular. Now, they're just curious, dog curious, rather than dog aggressive or dog reactive. You may have picked up a trend here, that it's not actually the dogs who are dangerous, but it is the person who is handling them, or the owner, or the person in charge of them at the time, who determines how dangerous they can be, depending on the situation that they put them in, or the management or lack of that they use. Yes, there are banned breeds, as the government have decided that these dog breeds or types pose a bigger threat to the public than others. And this is sadly because when these types of dogs have attacked someone, that person has often died as a result of their injuries. The fatality risk is much higher, so laws are put in place to prevent certain breeds and certain types from being bred from or owned if they're not exempt. However, these laws are often knee-jerk reaction laws when something tragic has happened, and they're often created by those who don't actually understand dog behaviour and seemingly don't seem to understand that the human who is responsible for the dog is in fact the dangerous one. Can genetics make a dog dangerous? Yes and no. Now, I'm a dog behaviour specialist and I specialise in resource guarding, multi-dog household struggles and reactive dog behaviour. And that means I work with a lot of Cocker Spaniels and Cockapoos. That is because there is a genetic component to dog behaviour. Dog behaviour is driven by different traits and motivations, and these are breed specific. But just because a breed of dog can be more likely to show a behaviour doesn't mean to say that they will. You may have a Cocker Spaniel who has never been reactive, never guarded anything, and gets on perfectly fine with household members. If you'd like to learn more about this, watch my video, The Geeky Side of Dogs. I'll link it for you in the description. So what makes a dangerous dog? Well, in my opinion, what makes a dangerous dog is a dog who is owned by someone who either denies the potential of what their dog could do and refuses to acknowledge it or take any steps towards preventing the safety of others, claiming their dog would never do something like that, whilst simultaneously putting them into scenarios which could cause a huge problem. Or a dangerous dog is one who is allowed to behave dangerously, and they're allowed to charge across the roads to get to people and dogs, or like a dog who is jumping up and running all over the house after a toy, and like a dog who is allowed to lunge and bark at passing people and dogs. But all of these behaviours remain firmly at fault with the human. If dog behaviour is worked with and well managed with a responsible owner who understands their role in keeping their dog and others safe, then breed and breed type isn't really relevant. Now, I'm not really a fan of the saying, there's no such thing as dangerous dogs, just dangerous humans. But, dogs can be dangerous. Dogs can be incredibly dangerous. But only if they are allowed to be by the person who controls everything. We control over 95% of what a dog does. We choose their walks, what they're going to walk on, where they're going to sleep, where they're going to eat, who they're going to interact with. We choose all of this. Everything in the dog's world is controlled by us. So we can't say a dog's dangerous. A dog isn't dangerous. A dog is dangerous because the person is allowing them to be dangerous.